conversation, so please keep that going in between every talk and of course in the breaks as well, because that's what will help you to really get the most out of it. The other thing, I guess, just to signpost a little bit, I'm going to keep repeating this element of what do you want to get from today. Well, each of our talks are visiting the stages of that framework that Joe's introduced you to. So just think about which really resonates with you. For a lot of you who said you're at the start, or what is a coaching culture? Maybe the visualize is the starting point. Maybe that's the most important thing for you to do, and everything else is about informing that future for you. And then as we move into our next stage, which is all about how we strategize, how we put a plan together, how we bring it to life. Again, maybe you've got the vision and it's now about how we put that together, and we have an unbelievable speaker who's going to help you to do just that. So before I invite Dr. Elouise to come up onto the stage, brace yourselves, technology time. We do want to ask you these questions before every talk, so I'm going to go back to manual control, and if you want to reopen your phones back to where you left on menti.com, and this is the question that should be posing itself to you to start with. Do you have a strategy to build a coaching culture? We've kept it really simple. Yes or no? It's not working. Panic, where's Adam? I think I pressed H before. H. Yeah. What does it say on your phones?
Oh, hang on.
Bear with.
There you go.
Yay! It gets there eventually.
There we go.
Look at that. Seamless, isn't it? Okay, so half and half. Okay, brilliant. So for those of you who have that strategy in place, this next talk is a great chance to think about how you can really bring that to life. What else could you add to it? And of course, for those of you who've been very honest in saying no, think about that as not yet. And again, the next speaker is going to really help you to think about how you can really build that strategy. So, we do have one more. So it hopefully should have moved it along for you for this next question. What word would you use to describe coaching in your organisation? So I believe this is a bit of a free style, so you can type whatever you would like and it's going to give us a word cloud. So we're really trusting you with this, aren't we? Because you might... I was going to say, the child in you now is thinking, what word do I want to put on a screen in a room full of people? We won't know it's you, so if you want to, go for it. Alien, brilliant. Patchy. Okay, what great words to describe it. Conversational, lovely stuff. Sporadic, yeah. Okay. Right, lovely stuff. Limited's in there. Haphazard. Elitist, wow. Yeah. Okay, brilliant stuff. So, the opportunity here today then is about how we turn that into the words that you would want to describe coaching in your organisation. So, fantastic that we've got honesty in there, okay but needs work. So, fantastic that you're able to share that honestly. Think about what it is that you would want to say. When we're back here next year and we ask you that question again, what is the word that you would want to choose to describe coaching in your organisation? And our next speaker is going to help you make that a reality for you. So I'm about to introduce Dr. Elouise Leonard-Cross for you. This is the bit where Elouise is panicking now. She's thinking, what's he going to say about me? Well, the first thing I'm going to say about Dr. Elouise is I think she used the best description for 2020 that I've heard. And we've heard a lot of these from everybody. We all have our own view. What I heard Elouise describe 2020 as is it's really reminded her that people are diamonds. What a fantastic way of describing that. Everything that we've been through, that was a great thing that really inspired me when I listened to Dr. Elouise recently, where she talks about people are diamonds. And she really gave this great message when she was saying, organisations will do a lot better by listening to people. You know, maybe that's why we've got the Great Resignation that Joe talked about before. You know, when we've all been working in isolation, potentially that's what they've been missing. It was a great message. What she also talked about was, we sometimes wait for permission to ask great questions. Why? Dr. Elouise talks about some of the strongest tools that we have at our disposal. So why are we waiting for permission to ask those powerful questions? And the final thing I'm going to say about her is that she also used a football analogy to brilliantly demonstrate the power of how coaching can create that engagement in your organisation. So you'll do for me, Elouise. You will definitely do for me. So let me bring up the person who I would describe who absolutely puts the human back into HR. Now, I've worked with in a lot of organisations, and sometimes the HR team, let's just be honest, are the least human in that organisation. Need some help? Here's a policy. Thanks, yeah. Elouise is about to really role model this and show you exactly how you can do just that. So let's welcome Elouise back up onto the stage, please.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Yeah, this is the first time I think I've spoken to real faces that everyone blanking themselves out, so that's quite exciting. So I'm here to talk to you about Strategize. So I've had the joy of doing a director of strategy role, so I'm a bit of a career hobo. So I'm a bit of a psychologist, I've done comms, and I've also done a bit of strategy, but it keeps it interesting. So what's great about today is that we are looking through every step of the way. And what I would say is I met Joe about a year ago, and we did a session together. And what I would say is, you know, you've made a great choice here today, because one of the things that I look at when I look at the framework is something that is really authentic and real. And I think as people working in organizations, we need tools that we can really work with and that really help us navigate through the entire process. And we absolutely get that with the coaching culture framework. However, going back to Joe's film analogy, some of you might remember a 1990s film with Reese Witherspoon called Pleasantville. So Pleasantville starts off where they're living in the black and white 1950s. It's a bit repressed and it's a bit serious until they emerge through into this bloom of colour. Now, if you look at that framework, I'm in the grey. I'm in Visualize. So if you look at step 2, it's in that grey bit. So we're gonna go through some of the grey. Now, this could be seen as a bit boring and a bit dull, but actually, it's not. It's quite interesting. So I'm going to talk you through some things that I've kind of picked up along the way, and my learning doing, you know, similar roles to a lot of you in this room here today, you know, leading OD functions, learning functions, implementing coaching. So first of all, I think, you know, for me, it's about, you know, that when we come to the strategy, if we don't define it and nail it down, we're going to really struggle. I often get the opportunity to speak to a lot of different HR directors and people leading learning functions. And a lot of people say, yeah, we're creating a coaching culture in our organization. I'm like, oh, why? And it's amazing how many times that question really throws people. And what my great belief is, HR, I think it's fair to say, being one of this group of people, we do quite like a buzzword. If that organization's doing it and that organization's doing it, hell's flames, we better do it as well. So what is really important to me is that can people talk about why they're doing something? And I think your ability to be able to explain the why comes down to having that really robust strategy to underpin. So I think keep that in mind, keep that why factor, and that is absolutely why we need this strategy in place. So what I want to start with is introducing you to Jim. Now, Jim could be a number of different people. So Jim is a morph. Jim isn't a real, well, obviously this person is a real person, but Jim isn't a real person. He represents a number of things from my past, my learning, and my experience in implementing coaching cultures. So Jim could be a number of people, but he's probably the person that you really need to keep in mind when you're developing your strategy. So let me explain. Often when I go to pitch to get some funding or some support for something we want to implement, I will get often maybe my director of customer or director, COO, who are right behind it. They're nodding, they're asking questions, they're challenging positively. Jim is often the person in the room for me who's sort of sat there, not saying too much, not derailing in public, but is often the person who's derailed afterwards, who's maybe felt a little uncomfortable. In my experience, and you will have your own Jim, he's tended to be either my CIO or CFO. and he has tended to have either information or money sat under him. And in my experience, there's about 3 people who are really clear in my mind, none of them called Jim, but in every example, they've sat over a department that has maybe not seen that much change. They've maybe got quite long tenure. Their department's been run the same way for quite a long time. So Jim, age, gender, I'm not pigeonholing that. This is definitely from my experience, but I want to start here because there's something about that, and we talked about humanity there before. I was developing this presentation a few weeks ago, a weekend. My then 3-year-old said, "Oh, who's that?" As she walked in, I said, "Oh, I'm doing a presentation." She said, "Oh, I don't think he's looking at you so kindly, Mummy." And I was like, yeah, that's right, that picture stays. So that is definitely the case. So Jim represents that person that we need to think about when we're developing our strategy, because they could challenge, they could derail, and it will come from a place to protect the business, but actually what we need to think about is what will that challenge be from that person. So as we go into this, keep Jim in mind and keep thinking about who's your equivalent to Jim in your organisation. So when we're sort of about to start developing our strategy, we want to be able to successfully pitch to the board to get buy-in and to deliver against it. As quite a current analogy, I want you to think about coaching as having this beautiful new car. So the bright colour bit of the framework, you're going to have the car that looks beautiful. People are going to want to sit in it. People are going to be drawn towards it. They're going to ooh and ah. You're going to get your early adapters who are going to want to buy into the car. That's fantastic. But not having a strategy is like the fuel shortage. You're going to get so far and then it's going to stop. So I want you to bear in mind, it can all look beautiful, it can be great, and can be put together and have the best engineering, but without the bit that's going to drive it, sustain it, and sort of have it, delivering against what it needs to be, it's not going to travel where it needs to go. So where I want you to start, and where I suggest everyone starts when they work with strategy. So it's not just been coaching strategies I've developed. As I say, I work more generally across strategy. But what I often say to people is, take yourself to a situation you're not familiar with. Now, obviously, probably one of you in this room will be some professional diver and be like, oh yeah, been there, done that. I know what I'm doing. But for most of us, if you're plonked underwater, you don't know what you're doing. It's very different. The rules totally change. And the way I talk about starting with strategy is try and look at the context, the ecology that's around you, as if you don't already know it. There's a certain amount of peace with that, because actually sort of thinking I don't know anything is actually you're less scrobbling to identify the bits you do. You know it's all new and different. So if we stop and think about where we want to go, what we already know in terms of the map, thinking in this way can be really helpful. I guess we all probably do it quite often as coaches. We'll get people to step away from the situation and look at it in a different way. But what's really important with this is I really think when it comes to trying to develop and nail down what this is all about and what we need to take into account, we need to think of it in different ways. And there's a couple of things in particular that I'd really draw out with this. So this is, when you're looking at the ecology, this is looking at both power and positions. So in terms of, there's a really great quote, Madeleine Homan, who's Director of Coaching for the Ken Blanchard companies, has a really great question, and she says, I always ask people when they say they're developing a coaching strategy, she says, have you mapped your key relationships yet? It's so basic, but it's amazing how many people say they've got a coaching strategy, and you say, oh yeah, tell me about your stakeholder mapping that sits behind it, and they haven't done that. And if we're coaching people, often we'll ask them about where is the kind of the power play, what's that map, what's going on behind what you're doing and how you're doing it. But then amazingly often we fail to do that when we're developing quite a fundamental strategy. So what she talks about as well, now this is quite interesting, she says when you're looking to change something in an organisation, she says think about who's it going to help and who's it going to hurt. Sounds quite strange on the surface, but the way I talk about it is who's going to gain and who's going to lose. Now, we know with every single change, there'll be losers and there'll be winners. It could be something small and insignificant. It could be something huge and phenomenal. Think of Jim. Think of my example of someone who's run a department in the way they've wanted for a long time, maybe got no turnover below them or very limited. They've had the same team of people under them for about 15 years. I worked a lot in the public sector, 15 years plus. That's not unusual. So for Jim, suddenly bringing a coaching culture where we might talk about this might actually start to release talent, get people moving, that's quite a scary proposition. So maybe immediately identifying losses. So get as creative as you can in thinking about that, who's going to win and lose. It can be really helpful. And then the other thing, and again, you've probably, when you coach training and you've covered this, but it's a tool I just come back to all the time when I'm developing strategy and trying to work out, who's got power and what matters, is the French and Raven model of power. It's old school, it's like vintage talk today. It's not modern, but it's a helpful lens. So I always think when we're doing this kind of stuff, it's really helpful to imagine, you're in the opticians of life, and what you've got in your toolkit bag is all these different lenses you can drop in to look at the same problem in different ways. And I find it really helpful using the French and Raven model, because I'm immediately thinking, well, who's our organisational influencer? Who's got that referent power? Who's got the reward power? Who's holding the purse strings on this? Who's got the positional power? Who's actually in this kind of legitimate position that actually people are listening to? And is there any coercive power happening? And we'll know that, and often as coaches ourselves in the organisation, actually we're probably more privy to that narrative than other people as well, which can be exceptionally helpful as we go on to explore. But what I would say is definitely think about what you're trying to do here is create quite a tangible output. As people practitioners, this is such a useful thing to have anyway. I often talk to people who go, yeah, I've got my stakeholders mapped. And I say, right, okay, let's have a look at it. They're like, oh no, it's up here. I go, wow, okay, that's good, but really, is it that useful? And actually, we all know that, how often do you bring something to coaching, and if you've got something quite tangible to put in front of the client that you start working with, how that conversation really takes to another level. So keep that in mind, but really think about, as we start and develop the strategy, power and positions. So this quote, I still go back to just because it's that whole thing about questions. So Joe's very flattering, but does like one of my quotes, which is, I believe that questions are the keys to unlock doors that we didn't even know existed. And I think as coaches, you sit in some of those most powerful seats because you actually, if you have nothing else, you have the opportunity to ask the right question at the right time. And we all know from client work that sort of that feeling that client gets when they're like, wow, you got me to this point. And you're like, absolutely not. I asked you the question and you got yourself to that point. But for me, that coming back to questions is so key in this. So we've got to flush out through the strategy thinking about the questions we need to ask and can we answer them. So imagine you're hauled up onto a stage to talk about this coaching culture you want to talk about, and you're going to get from the audience every question under the sun, and you're going to be challenged on that. So the best thing you can do, it's like an interview, start preparing those questions. So the way I've done it before is to say to people, you know what, we're developing strategy, but we're coaches, so let's get our coach on. So there's some different questions up here. These were absolutely not all of them. They were just some that popped into my mind to throw down, think about the ones that were particularly useful. But what's really key here is, by starting with the questions, you start to capture those really great insights, and actually going through those, you start to shape the strategy. What I should have probably said at the start is often when people say strategy, they think of those hideous 16-page organisational documents that no one reads, but everyone must have the link to somewhere. And maybe if you're going for promotion internally, you quickly find it and make sure you know it. But no one is really that passionate about a strategy, apart from maybe the director of strategy. But, no one is like day to day. It doesn't drive what we do. What we talk about is the essence of it. So I think for me, when I'm talking about a strategy, I ain't talking about some fancy multi-page documents. I'm talking about keeping it simple, but actually that starts from these absolutely great questions. So I would say, in terms of practical, that my best approach has been pull a diverse group of people together, get sat in a room and start asking the most random, weird, difficult, tricky, different perspective question you possibly can, and start to answer those and capture them, because that is your bones of your strategy. That is the framework you absolutely need. And you'll see there's that kind of that real breadth around. But I think for me, there's the key question that I've always got to check back, because I can never remember exactly how he says it, because he's so blooming good at wording it. But Hawkins talks about, he says, how will coaching serve the core strategy of the business? And that's in his coaching strategy book. And I love that one, because I think, that in terms of, these are sort of some more granular parts of that, but that is absolutely key. So we all like a quick tool and model. So this is available. I put the link in there. This is I've gone through quite a lot of things I like and I don't like, and there's sort of different bits, but I like it if you can get it on one page. People don't like having to turn over pieces of paper. We just don't have the energy anymore. So if we can get it on one page, we're going to actually use it. And we can pop it down in front of people and everyone can have a bit of a glance when we're talking about things. So keep it simple. So this is the Bgi strategy on a page. This is not a coaching strategy document, this is just a strategy document, but it works. So what's cool about this is what they have here is on the left, there's a dotted line there. I don't know if you can see it, maybe I'm just under it so can't, but there's a dotted line. So at the left of that is the things that are nailed down about your business already. So we've got your purpose, your values, your vision, the stuff there that needs to be in there. Now, what's key if we're developing a coaching strategy is we need to look for alignment. So we need to look for alignment to both the business strategy and the culture. Quick caveat, if it doesn't align to the culture, is it aligning to the espoused culture? I.e., have you maybe got a new CEO who's saying, no, we need to change to this, but it needs to align to either existing culture, i.e., that's what we're really driving for, or where we want to be. And to the right of it, we've got there the more tangible bits that you need to develop. Top line. This is where we want to get to. So where do we want to be? What are those goals? You know, where will we be after maybe year 1, 3, and year 5? And really starting to be clear on those. And underneath is the how we're going to do it. So that is starting to be actually some of the actions, some of the action planning. As you're developing this document, you will move from strategize to operationalize. That's cool, captured both. So what I mean by that is we have the strategy, which is the broader idea, and the operationalize, the bits we've already touched on. Oh, well, that butt up against that process, we might need to change that. How would we make that decision? The granular detail of the stuff you're running, don't lose that. That's absolutely needed as well, and starts to allow the programs and the rollout to work. But it's not for this document, but it needs to be captured. Here we're keeping it that high level, that stuff you can pitch back to the board, that stuff you can explain. What I would say with this as well is be really clear on what will change as a result. So we need to be clear on what is the cost, but also where would we tend to see change? Where will business see the benefit? If you can't identify any benefit that business can look at and measure, why would they do it? And there will be some, and you can get quite creative with those. I think for me, one of the key things is I always prepare my board for what might change that they might initially see as negative, but I can explain why it's positive, but I do it up front. Let me give you an example. If you use coaching to give people a voice, you can't then be surprised if people use that voice and speak truth to power and give you feedback. So suddenly quite a quiet business can become a business where people are empowered to speak up. That is a positive sign. That's a sign of culture shift. But if we haven't worked with our boards and our senior teams to understand that change might happen, they'll misread that as a bad thing. People are unhappy. This coaching isn't working. No, this is working. People are actually speaking up. So start to think about, some of these practical elements, these strategies, what measures might look like. Will people be more honest with colleague voice type measures? That's a great measure to explain to people as you start into it. Key thing here is, have you got in the levers that matter most to your business? If your business is about sales, if it's about customer service, if it's about, time to fix issues, if it's about, patient satisfaction, are you linking to those things that are in the business strategy and talking about the levers that matter to the business in this? And I think the other key thing is make sure you've got the language of the business as well. Use their terms. It may not feel like our terms. Coaches have energy, they have passion, but sometimes our language doesn't quite translate to the boardroom. That's okay. We use it sparingly, but how do we use the language that persuades the people that we need to get on the page with this? So, in summary, I just want to say, think about these questions. Who is your gym? And you're probably already thinking about who's your gym. How will coaching serve the core strategy of the business and be in alignment to either where the business wants to go or the journey the business is already on? Do you really understand the operating context? Like, really understand it? Like, underwater understand it? Have you or can you map those roles? So if you don't already have it, do it. Sit on the train, think about doing it. If you haven't got it, map those roles and where does power sit? Who's your winners and who's your losers if you get a coaching culture really, really running in your business? Have you approached development of your strategy like a coach? And if you haven't, think about that. Think about the tools that are in your kit bag that you use as a coach to apply to this strategy. And really importantly, have you got your language right? Do you talk to the board? But most importantly, does your language allow you to persuade Jim? So I hope that helped. Thank you very much.